All right.
Okay, you're live.
All righty. So thank you so much. So team folks, everyone, thank you so much for attending today's session. Welcome to our meetup. And today we have an interesting topic, which we're going to cover Hyperledger Fabric deployment on AWS, IBM, and Oracle platforms. Today's speaker is Matt Zand. Matt is the CEO of HashFlow and has actually authored a book on O'Reilly. So if you're familiar with the O'Reilly books, I think we all are. The book is titled Hands-On Smart Contract Development with Hyperledger Fabric V2. So I think you guys are in for a treat. Matt's an entrepreneur. He's written more than 100 technical articles and tutorials on blockchain for both Hyperledger and Ethereum platforms, and at sites including IBM, SAP, and Alibaba. So at HashFlow, he leads a team of blockchain experts for consulting and deploying enterprise dApps. He has a master's degree in business management from University of Maryland. If anyone has any questions, by all means, you can either again, ask questions here on our chat. We also have in our chat now, you'll see a link to our YouTube live stream. So potentially you can ask questions there. And with that being said, over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Jeff, for introductions. And again, thanks again for Hyperledger community for having me again in your community. And so basically today, as Jeff said, I'm going to talk about, how to deploy the Fabric on cloud. And there are three most popular platforms right now for deploying the Fabric. One is that AWS, and is IBM and Oracle. And another one outside the United States is Alibaba, which is also number 4. And I have to tell you that Azure is not supporting the blockchain anymore. There used to be a very good platform, Azure, but they are not supporting. They shut down their blockchain platform a few months ago. So again, I'm assuming that you have some knowledge of Hyperledger, blockchain, Hyperledgers, and then again, I'm going to cover Hyperledger component, in a little bit, in a very, scratch the surface, and then I jump into the AWS, IBM, and Oracle. And one of the things is that you have to keep in mind that this is high-level presentation. And in each platform have so much stuff if you want to really get into the detail and deploy it step by step. So again, fortunately, my book covers all of these topics in more detail and a very hands-on way that we can follow. So before we start, I'm assuming that you know the Hyperledgers because you're a member of Hyperledger community and you know the Hyperledger ecosystems and the distributed ledger technologies under the Hyperledger, and most specifically, I am hoping that you know how the Hyperledger Fabric works. I'm going to a little bit cover it just in case that you are not familiar. So as Jeff covered my bio, I'm just jump into the outline. So I'm going to talk about Hyperledger Fabric architecture and then how you can deploy the Hyperledger Fabric on AWS, IBM, and Oracle. Each one of these platforms have their own kind of the solutions for blockchain development or deploying the blockchain platform in them. And then also, if you want to deploy your first platform, I also give you like step-by-steps that you just follow them. And so regarding the Hyperledger architecture and component, this is a rundown, very high level of the key component of Hyperledger Fabric: a peer ordering service or orderer, Fabric certificate authority, managing all the certificates. So as you know, if you are a member of blockchain network, you have to have a certificate in order to participate in activities of the network. So, and then the way that Fabric manages certificate, it follows a hierarchy from top down, from top main admin to the bottom, which are the individual members of the network. And then we have Fabric ledgers and then channel. Channel allows certain members in the network to communicate or exchange certain data with one another. And then we have a smart contract with chain code. And then we have endorsement policy, which is a part of a policy. And in the Fabric, there is a whole area that's called policies or policy. This is an amazing feature in Fabric, which allows to make rules regarding who does what in the network and on what conditions, and when or where. So all these conditions and rules and regulation can be defined in the policies. And all the members in the Fabric consortium or Fabric network need to agree on those policies before that policy going to be enforced, And then we have membership service providers, again, in charge of managing all the identities in the network, right? And so again, the peer can be created, start, stop, and reconfigured and then deleted. So peer is like a node, and every organization has one peer or one node in the Fabric network. And then you can also communicate with the peer through the API, as external, through the external UI. And then ordering service, again, in a very simple way, orderer or ordering service is a regulator. So in a Fabric network, there's so many transactions going on, but there has to be a way to sort these transactions and add them to the ledger, right? So the job of the orderer is to receive the transaction, validate them, and send them to the parties send them to the party that need to approve them or reject them. And once the consensus is achieved, the orderer is going to add them to the ledger and then gossip back or broadcast back that successful transaction to the other members in the network, or all the members in the network. So that's what the orderer does. It's just intermediary or a regulator for conducting or managing or ordering all of the transactions in the system. So initially, when the Fabric started, the type of the orderer was solo, and then Kafka came. Now the Kafka is not supported anymore, so you have to stick with this Raft for managing your ordering service. Now, regarding the architecture of Fabric, we have different organizations. As I said, each organization has a one node, and then each organization can have its own certificate authority that manages its own team credential. And then also we have a main organization. As I said, there's a top-down, hierarchy of the credential management. And then another topic is just a channel. As I said, inside the Fabric network, we can have multiple ledgers, and each ledger is maintained by each channel. So channel allows certain parties inside the network to communicate, and so that's communication between certain parties. I'm going to show you next graph. Can be done by channel, and channel adds more complexity to the network. At the same time, it's meant for a reason. So one of the reasons why Fabric is so popular for enterprise is that it allows more resilience and flexibility with regard to the project requirement. So in other words, as your project requirement increases, then you start appreciating the Fabric's features and component. As a result, as you notice, the architecture of the Hyperledger Fabric is a little bit has a learning curve. It's a little bit difficult to learn at the beginning. Once you learn it, and once you add more component and more requirement to your project, then you start realizing that Fabric is very more efficient and structured than Serium, because I know also Serium blockchain development. Fabric is much more structured, organized for larger scale projects. Well, each organization can participate in multiple channels, or it can be a part of different channels, right? For example, channel 1 can have 3 organizations participant, and channel 2 can have only organization 2 and organization 3, right? And so basically, the thing is that inside each channel, you can have a smart contract. You can have specific policies that govern only that members of that channel, or only that type of the transaction that taking place or data that is shared inside that channel. And then in the Hyperledger Fabric network, we have something called system channel, which is the admin or main channel that governs the whole network. And then for managing the kind of the credential identity, we have something called root certificate authority, or root CA, that manages all the like is administrator of the whole network. And then each individual channels or members, they can have their own membership service provider. Again, it follows the top-down hierarchy, right? And so the thing is that when you want to access the kind of the the SDK, you want to access the organization, you still need to have some provisions, that you can receive it from your MSP, right? So a little bit graphical, it shows you better. So we have a system channel, and then which governs the whole network, and then we have an orderer, and then we have, in this case, we have two organizations, two peers, right? And then we have channels. So for this one, as you see, we have 3 members. So channel 1 has orderer, organization 1, organization 2, and channel 2 is only have orderer and organization 2. So you see that the different, each channel can have its own node or organization to join. So that's add more complexity to Fabric network, especially if you're using the Fabric version 2. It's also add more complexity when it comes to the private data collection, which I'm not going to go over that. I covered this in my last talk in Atlanta. So the thing is that when it comes to the chain code, so basically in the chain code, what is that? In the chain code, we have something called a state database. It's like a key value database. If you know MongoDB, it's just similar to NoSQL database. And by default, Fabric support the level DB, but I really suggest the CouchDB, because Fabric version 2 support cache for CouchDB, which means that you can also perform more in your systems. One of the key characteristics of the state database is that the data that is stored on a state database is mutable, is changeable. You can add and update that data. However, the data that is added to the ledger itself is immutable and it cannot be changed. So let me show you what I'm talking. So basically, so you have a chain code or a smart contract, and then we have a node or peers. Inside each node or peers, we have a state database, which can be changed, can be updated, can be added and deleted. And then we have a ledger, which is like a log, log file, if you're familiar with the system administrations. And this is not going to be changed. This is immutable. And basically, this is sync across all the nodes in the system. So if something happened to this blockchain, Hyperledger network, and if one of the nodes get compromised, then through the ledger, like Ethereum, you can sync all the, you can sync back and recover back this node to its original conditions, because that ledger data is immutable and replicated across all the nodes. Now, one of the things is that from outside, if you want to invoke, get some information from the nodes and show them the UI, then you communicate through this network to the state database. Now, one of the things is that in the Fabric version 2, as I covered in my last talk, you can watch the video, there's something called external chain code launcher that comes with the Fabric version 2. So basically, you can invoke the chain code or smart contract outside your network. And then that's makes the job of maintenance and lifecycle management of your chain code much easier. And again, another features that's very important for the Fabric version 2 is chain code lifecycle management, which allows you to manage the lifecycle very smoothly using the latest version of the Fabric. Now, So now that you know about Fabric component, let me jump into the cloud providers. The first cloud provider that I'm going to cover is AWS, or Amazon Web Services. The thing is that no matter what you do, meaning that you have an architectural model or whatever, at the end of the day, you have to use a cloud provider to deploy it, your kind of the blockchain or Hyperledger solution. So AWS is usually the primary choice for many, but by all means, I'm saying I'm in favor of the AWS or other platform. I'm just gives you an idea that AWS Managed Blockchain Services is usually is currently used by many people at different stages, like proof of concept, minimum viable product, or even production. Now, AWS offer different kind of this. So I'm going to talk about AWS blockchain services shortly, meaning that there are different solutions that Amazon's offer for managing your blockchain infrastructure or your blockchain platform, right? So most popular one is AWS or Amazon's Managed Blockchain. Now, one of the problem with this Amazon's Managed Blockchain, based on the client that we have, is that they still support the old version of Hyperledger 1.6 as of today, which is not supported by Hyperledger anymore, starting April 2021. So it has some effect on security, even though Amazon is quite secure, but it still is not supported anymore. So that's one of the reasons many people who are right now using AWS managed blockchain at the production level are thinking of moving away from AWS to either other platform or to the another solution that AWS offered called AWS Blockchain Template, which means that you have to do everything from ground zero. You set up, deploy everything, network everything step by step. So nothing is managed for you there, right? But it gives you flexibility of working with both hybrid, Ethereum and Hyperledger Fabric, as well as managing all of your certificates by yourself. But you have to watch for securities, all this kind of the network things. Now, if you want to, coming back to the AWS, if you want to do a very simple demo and just quickly build a blockchain and deploy it on Fabric, you can use the Amazon's Managed Blockchain. So there are 3 steps that you want to do that. The first thing, you have to set up your account is AWS. The second is that set up Fabric network. And the third step is that set up Fabric client on that, right? So for each step, there are sub-steps, like there are things that you have to follow. And so for the lack of time, I just leave it for you guys. You can get my book. We cover each one of these steps in more detail. And for example, in AWS, we have something called identity and access management. But if you know how the Hyperledger works, we have something called access control list, right, in Hyperledger. So it's similar to the access control list, right? And then when it's come to a network, you have to set up your network, create your virtual private, the endpoint. And then when it's come to set up your Fabric client, you have to install that. You have to install your chain code, instantiate your chain code, and all the environmental variables, your policies, YAML file configuration. Install your chain code, the smart contract, instantiate it on that node, query that, invoke it. So basically, these are all steps by step that you follow in order to deploy your Fabric to create your Fabric client on AWS Managed Services. So again, we covered all of this in more detail in our book. Now, with regard to AWS, right? They offer kind of the 3 ways to create blockchain services on their platform. So one of them called Amazon Ledger Database. So it's just basically a quantum ledger database, or QLDB, is just a database whose data is immutable, meaning that this is a special type of NoSQL, NoSQL database whose data are immutable. Because if traditionally, the SQL or NoSQL database data can be altered or can be changed, updated, right? So this if you use this kind of a service from Amazon, it allows you to use a database whose data are immutable and transparent to all parties that involved. So it's like a form of blockchain in itself, right? And then we have AWS blockchain template, as I mentioned earlier. This is meant for the companies who are really looking for build a blockchain from ground zero, everything to manage by themselves. And then platform everything, but gives them more performance and resilient flexibility, as well as an option to make it hybrid, with Ethereum and then Hyperledger Fabric. So this is the choice for many serious large scale project. Now, as I discussed it earlier, Amazon Managed Blockchain Services also is very popular because it's very easy. Relative to the template, the other one is much easier to deploy and use it because managed by Amazon. But obviously, it's more expensive, and also the thing is that currently is not supporting the latest version of the Fabric. So, which means that not only your platform lacks some security issues, but also you cannot also enjoy or benefit some of the features of Fabric version 2 that's offered, like external chain code launcher, things like that, or chain code lifecycle management. So that's if you think of pros and cons of the AWS managed services, the advantages is that's very easy. Disadvantages are that it's not supporting the latest versions, and also the thing is that it doesn't have so much flexibility when it comes to the including adding other features, that other libraries of Fabric. Now that you know about AWS, we move on to Fabric deployment on IBM. So the name of IBM is already known in the Hyperledger community. It's quite, IBM was one of the leading supporters, has been at the beginning, and it still is one of the leading supporters of Hyperledger ecosystem. And then IBM Cloud Service allows users to fully manage their deployment, certificate, and private keys. And it provides a simplified UI that allows developers to easily deploy Fabric component into the Kubernetes, Red Hat, OpenShift. So the things about Amazon the things about IBM is that IBM support the latest version of the Fabric, which is great, which means that you can reap the benefit of all of the security and features of Fabric version 2. Now, one of the things about IBM is that if I want to quickly run down or just give you a very quick overview of the main feature of IBM platform, I can summarize them into three categories, three areas: development, operation, and scalability. In other words, if you start building if you want to start building your Hyperledger applications and you want to use the IBM, you can take advantage of IBM at three different stages: development, operation, and scalability. So development meaning that when you're building your platform, what are areas where IBM can be resourceful, right? Or handy. So one is that they have something called Red Hat Marketplace, where you can go there and get some kind of a template that it can help you to easily deploy your network fast. And then also you can use the Kubernetes resources. You can increase your Kubernetes resources to easily go from POC to productions. So that's another advantage that IBM has. And then IBM also has a very nice kind of the developer tools. Their platform has a very good developer tools that you can also utilize. Now, with regard to operation, the features that IBM platform offers is that you can deploy the peers on multiple channels, on multiple clouds at the same time, which is, again, is great for enterprise or kind of the consortium. And you can also have a unified code-based features that runs on your component, your environment. So basically, so it allows you to run your component in a multiple platform at the same time. And then of course, dynamic signature collections, which allows you to manage all of the signatures of credential of the parties involved, which is great for collaborative governance of the channels, of the channel configuration, meaning that if you want to collect all the signatures or certificates of the people involved in your channel, you can use this features. And then also, again, another one is that IBM allows you to remove all the Docker in Docker for chain codes, give the chain code more mobility in the pod, so that they can run more security without fearing requesting privileged access. So basically, it gives the chain code more mobility when the chain code is going to move from one node to another node, and it's also part of the chain code lifecycle management, that you have to keep in mind, especially when you're dealing with chain code across the channels. And this is fantastic features that I have to highlight it. So basically, IBM allows you to easily upgrade to the latest version of the fabric. So it gives the system admin and developer peace of mind that they don't need to worry about can keep track of the versions or things like that. Then it allows them to automatically upgrade that. As you notice that we don't have these features in Amazon, in AWS. And then integrating of logging and monitoring tools with IBM is very good. So IBM, again, initially IBM created something called Hyperledger Composer to monitor the network, but then they discontinued that, and now still in their platform they have something that you can use for logging and monitoring the network performance. Now, with regard to the scalability, IBM also offers some kind of the features. One is that amount of the resources, the computer power resources that you're utilizing by your network, like CPU, memory, storage, and even you can also optimize and adjust the amount of resources you're using inside your Kubernetes cluster, which is great for scalability. And also ability to replicate your Kubernetes deployment across multiple zones and regions. That's another fantastic features of the IBM. And then it also helps you to easily recover. If something happened, in case of disaster recovery, you can also use that Kubernetes cluster instance to easily replicate the whole network back to its original conditions. So now that we know about the features of IBM in serious stages of development, operation, and scalability, now another things that you have to know, or another key interesting features of IBM is that IBM blockchain platform has some kind of console that you can easily create and manage your blockchain application by using that console. So you can easily create your service instance, all this stuff you can do, like Kubernetes cluster, manage everything, their certificate, ordering service. Now, the two things you have to watch for is that, or there are two limitations of console, is that you have to monitor the health and security and login of the Kubernetes cluster by yourself, right? And also, you have to manage your security, your certificate, and private key by yourself. So IBM is not going to manage or create a private key or manage your certificate private key for you. So you have to do it. So that's only two limitations of that console. Other than that, the console is very handy and it's very useful to use. Now that we know about the IBM, so the question is, okay, I have an application and I want to deploy an IBM. What's next? How I can follow the steps to deploy my application on IBM, right? The first is that create an account on IBM Cloud Platform, get the account there, and then decide what kind of the network structure you want to use, right? How many members, how many MSP, membership service providers or certificate authority, how many peers, order. For example, in our book, we cover very simple example like this. You can have 2 certificate authority, 2 MSP, 1 peer, 1 orderer, 1 channel that include 1 peer and 1 orderer. So in our book, we cover this example of IBM to deploy, And then after that, you create and join the network. Then you build a blockchain network, which means the certificate authority, admin identity, register the users. Then create a peer organization, MSP definitions, then create your peer node, create ordering service orderer, add organization to it as a consortium members, and then create and join the channel, deploy a smart contract, and create the applications. These are step by step you follow in order to deploy your Hyperledger on IBM. And again, I'm telling you, this is very high level. I'm scratching the surface, gives you very high level. If you want to learn more about this in detail, we cover in depth in our book, because some of these steps, they are more detailed than this. You have to follow step by steps, like a tutorial, a guide in each one of them. So just look at our chapter in IBM in our book. Now, let's move on to the last platform, which is Oracle. Well, Oracle, with regard to Oracle, I'm going to cover Oracle Blockchain Platform overview, and then the architecture of the Oracle follows. In our Oracle, in our book, we covered one hands-on practical example or project, which is for universities issuing the certificate for the student graduate. And we followed it step by step, from defining the problem, what is the problem universities and recruiters or employers and the students are facing, which is in the fake credential, right? And how we can use the blockchain to solve that problem, right? And how we can use the Oracle Blockchain Platform or OBP to deploy or application in the Oracle, and what are the steps we follow to do that. And then after that, how we can interact with that solution once the product goes live, right? How we can instantiate the smart contract on it. So that's just a higher level topic they are covering in Oracle, right? Now, regarding the Oracle offers 3 types of the product when it comes to blockchain development in the platform. One is called Oracle Blockchain Platform Cloud Service, another called Oracle Blockchain Platform Enterprise Editions, which they have also a pre-built solutions, meaning that easy like managed services. It's already cooked up, you just use it. And on the Oracle Blockchain Platform Cloud Service, it includes a pre-assembled platform as a service or PaaS, So basically everything is cooked up, is already set up for you guys to use it right away, It's a template-based provisioning. And it also uses the Oracle OCI, means Oracle Cloud Interface, which you can easily manage all the dependencies of your containers, virtual machines and identities, things like that. So I'm going to talk about this in the next slide. And then we have another one, the last one. If you notice, it was similar to the AWS, right? So Oracle offers a tamper-resistant blockchain table. So it's like a database whose data cannot be altered, is immutable. But it's like a semi-blockchain network that they offer in their platform, right? So now, a little bit of the way that Oracle Blockchain Platform, specific with regard to Hyperledger, is structured. It's like this. So we have this infrastructure, and PaaS, and then we have cloud platform here, IaaS, SaaS, like that. And then there is RESTful API, SDK, and administrations, and they communicate with the Oracle platform, right? And then we have data services. Oracle Blockchain Platform is very good for data analytics, and because they have very good connections with their databases and do the analytic on your data. So inside the fabric of the Oracle, they have distributed ledgers, they have a smart contract, they support the smart contract, different languages, consensus, Raft and support Raft. By the way, Oracle also support version 2 of the fabric, which is great resource and great kind of the support that they have for fabric. And then also they give you the access control list. And then also you can do the your data, private data collections and channel inside the Oracle. And again, we covered this is more detail in our book. And so the problem that we discovered in our book with Oracle, we discuss what the problem is, how we can solve the problem with blockchain, and what are the steps we follow to deploy that, and how we can experience that. So in other words, we do like this. So from the left to right, so first thing we do in Oracle Cloud interface, we do the configuration, like other platform. You need to create an account, right? Choose your blockchain plan, and create your account. And then after that, just to then what the component of Oracle you want to use. Then you create your instance, Oracle blockchain platform instance. Then you create your blockchain network. Then, for example, add the participant, export, import participant certificate, set up your orderer, things like that. And then create your transaction infrastructure, meaning that the name of the application we are using in our platform is called Founder. Create a channel at the founders, or add the participant to your peers and your channels. And then once you create the transaction infrastructure, the next thing you will do is to add some form of smartness or smart contract to it. Develop your chain code, deploy your chain code, instantiate your chain code, and test your chain code. So basically, there are 1, 2, 3, 5 steps that you follow to deploy your Fabric application on Oracle, from creating an account, creating an instance, network, and transaction infrastructure, and then chain code or smart contract, right? So as I mentioned earlier, this is very high level of that task, or the steps that you follow. So for each one of these steps, there is a specific tutorial, like steps that you have to follow to do it. So again, take your book and take my book, and we cover those in detail in our book, right? Now, the thing is that just to give you a snapshot, or it's just a very overview of the things that we cover in our project in Oracle chapter. So in our project, in this case, in our university example, we have different stakeholders like employers, university, and then what's called the students, and then also the employers, right? That they interact. The resumes goes to this platform, is verified, and then each participant in your network, there's something called access control list. Each participant have certain level of access, like read only, read or write, who can only read, just to view the review the data, which party can add or edit the data, and what are the list of the asset that we have for the learner, for a student, for the set, what are the type of certificate we have, and then what are the list of transaction we have in our system, like creating a receiver, adding a certificate, approving the certificate. So what are the list of transactions? These are list of transactions that we have in our example. And then milestone, what are the things that we need to check in the network, right? So these are the things that we cover in detail in our example of the book, in our book of the Oracle example, right? Now that I covered this 3 blockchain cloud platform and show you how you deploy your Hyperledger Fabric there, some of the things that you may need to know is like, what's the difference between system admins and a developer? So if you're involved in Hyperledger Fabric, you end up having one of these 2 roles, one as a system administrator, another one as a Fabric developer. But obviously, in a larger project, you might have other hats like Fabric architect, Fabric business analyst, or things like that you may have. But in general, at a very high level, 2 major roles are system administrator and versus the Fabric developer. If you welcome system admins, this is some of the major tasks that you are going to do on a daily basis. Going to be application lifecycle management, configure the network, do the troubleshooting on the logs, on the ledgers, and manage the MSP or membership service providers, manage the network, monitor the network, things like that. And in order to be successful as a system admin, you need to also have some knowledge of Fabric, meaning that you need to know the Linux command, you need to bash scripting, you need to Docker, and you need to know a little bit of Kubernetes, depending on the platform, CouchDB, and NoSQL database. And obviously, you have a good knowledge of blockchain, how the blockchain works. And then I really suggest you guys take this. If you want to really prove yourself to the employers that you really know what you're doing, as a system admin, as a Fabric system admin, you should take the below certification. It's called Certified Hyperledger Fabric Administrations. This exam is taken by the Linux Foundations, and you can go check out the Hyperledger website to learn more about these certifications. On the other hand, if you become a Fabric developers, then you compared to the system admin, your main job is to work on the smart contract or chain code. So you need to be a good programmer. You need to design the logic of a smart contract, develop it, and test to deploy it on the Fabric. So that's mostly our book is about. So our book is about people who want to become a Fabric developer. And starting 2020, Hyperledger Fabric also offers certification for Fabric developer, which is a very great certification if you want to solidify your skills. So some of the major tasks that the Fabric developers usually do on a daily basis is works on the transaction functions, run the queries, simple and complex. We cover all of this in our book, by the way. And define the assets, identify potential private data, manage the private data collection in Fabric, and then submit, evaluate, and query transaction by invoking the smart contract, right? And then if you want to become good Fabric developers, you need to have some knowledge of programming, and you have to understand how the blockchain works. But with regard to the programming languages, any language, like JavaScript, in our book we cover JavaScript, which is a very simple programming language, but you can do Java, Go, and Python. And then certification, as I said, this is a great certification if you want to validate your skills as a Fabric developer. Again, this exam is taken by Hyperledger, by Linux Foundation. You can go to Hyperledger Foundation to learn more about this certification exam. And then a little bit of HashFlow. In our company, HashFlow, we help different clients, enterprise clients, in all different stages of the Hyperledger Fabric product development, from POC to the productions. And we can also offer services for deployment of Fabric in AWS, IBM, and Oracle. And then if you want to learn more about our company, or if you want to ask, if you want to discuss your project with me privately, you can also add me in LinkedIn and message me directly, or you can go to our website and contact us there. And well, I think we want to recap what we covered in this presentation, right? In this presentation, we discussed about Hyperledger Fabric component, like an orderer, like a peer, like a channel, and how those different components work together. And we also discuss how, at a very high level, how you can deploy a Fabric in top 3 popular cloud platform of AWS, IBM, and Oracle. We also talks about what are the features, specific features offered in each cloud platform. And then we also show you a step-by-step process that you follow in order to deploy your first blockchain or Hyperledger platform in one of those platforms. And then I also cover about a different route that you can take, like become a Hyperledger Fabric system admin versus developers, and what are the requirements and certificate with regard to each kind of the path that you want to take. So with that being said, I am ready to take on your questions, but also before the questions, I also add some resources here that you can read on your own. And then if you want to learn AWS, we also offer AWS training in our school. And then about my book, if you want to check out my book and learn the topic that I discussed in this webinar in more in depth, you can check out my book. And we have one chapter on the Hyperledger Fabric deployment on cloud. So now I'm ready to take on your question, Jeff.
Thank you so much for a great presentation. I'm going to start off with one question that Jess Hurwitz asked just a bit earlier. See if I can find it here. Bear with me one second. It's hiding on me. Or unless, Jess, you want to jump in and ask it. I think it had to do with, let's see.
Okay, I'm seeing right now. Okay, Jeff.
Yes, question. Can you discuss the differences from platform to platform for deploying a node with an external third party?
Yes, so so it's so basically so what you're asking me is like let's say that we have one node, in IBM, one node in AWS, and one node in Oracle. And if you want to use external, what's the difference between different nodes in different parties? So the answer comes back to the fact that each party has its own configuration, when it comes to that. Because you see, there are two areas of, one is that the Fabric software itself, the Fabric, the source code of the Fabric itself, which is external, right? Which is managed by the Fabric Foundation. And then you have other components, the UI, things like that, that offer and are specific to your platform, right? So again, the differences when it comes to that, one thing is that all of these have one thing in common, is that the source code of the Fabric comes from outside, and that's the same. For example, if the Fabric is supported, a smart external, a smart contract or chain code launcher, it's the same in all of them. It doesn't matter which platform we choose, because it's come from the Fabric, right? Now, with regard to the way that each platform support that, like meaning that if one platform only accept the Kubernetes, like support Kubernetes, another platform has its own kind of the database, right, for handling off the chain. So there is a variation between different platforms. And so one of the things is that my suggestion is that if you're exploring something very simple, any of those platforms would be good. But obviously the easiest one might be the one that's already managed services, right? But on the other hand, if you're moving to productions, you have to look at how much resources you have internally in terms of managing the platform by yourself or deploying everything by yourself. So that's kind of the answer. So Jeff, I see a lot of questions. Let me see if I can see Maria. AWS Hybrid as a node, Promise, and other clouds. Okay, Maria asks, AWS blockchain template enable hybrid in some node on Promise and other cloud. And so, yes, the answer to Maria is yes. AWS blockchain template of support hybrid. Yes, that's correct. And no, AWS offers the hybrid, but it's done through the template, Maria. And then Maria, I will cover that. Let's see if I can. So Jeff, I'm going through the question to see if I see what. We'll see. I can find some info regarding the support. I know IBM provide hybrid support. Okay, yeah. As I mentioned, IBM provide hybrid support too. Yes, you're right, Jeff. And then we have an open source project that uses answer. Okay, feel free to browse and use anything you might be useful. Okay, that's just information. Okay, thanks. And we have opened the. Okay, everyone.
So Matt, you've got a question towards the end, which is, can you discuss the differences? Oh no, you already did that one. There was one beforehand, which was in your book, there are sections installing prerequisites, including Fabric installation script. If I use the Amazon Managed Blockchain or AWS blockchain templates, do I need to install Fabric by myself via the installation script from your book?
No. So what happened is, if you're using Amazon Managed Services, they already installed those for you. So you only need to install the network. Just bring up the network. But major configuration has already been installed by you, by Amazon Managed Services.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Folks, team, any other?
I have a question.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Are Linux Foundation certification recognized widely?
What was the question? Jeff, did you get it?
The certifications of Linux Foundation, are they recognized?
Oh yes, they're the best certification out there. So right now, if you have no education, let's say, put it this way, have no education, and let's say you have no education, not much of the experience, program experience, but if you get one of those certifications that I mentioned, you're good. You're really gonna shine in terms of the recruiters that are looking for, because both of those certifications that offered by Linux Foundation are great certificates, but they are not easy. They are not easy. That's the reason they are very good certification, because both of them are challenging. But if you would be able to get them, then you would be good to shine to the recruiters. in the Hyperledger community.
Awesome. Any other questions? Folks, that if you have any thoughts, certainly, yep, the Linux Foundation certification is, there's a lot of great information, educational material that's out there.
Jeff, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Sorry. Matt, do you have any experience with which programming, if there are differences, like if you develop a smart contract in Go, will it run better on Oracle than on IBM than on AWS, and like that with Node.js and Python and the other scripting languages for the smart contracts? Are there differences between the platforms, or is it more of a difference between the programming languages?
I think it's between programming languages, not the platform. It has nothing to do with the platform.
Okay, just wanted to be sure that.
Yeah, but plus also on top of that, the question, there's another question related to you I get sometimes, is that is choice of programming languages has anything to do with performance? Because some people think that if they select the Golang or Java, they might get a better performance on their application. But the answer is no, that's not correct. So you can get a good performance with JavaScript versus the Go. It's just a matter of choice, but it has nothing to do with the performance of your application, if what program languages you choose.
That I find curious. This is Jeff. So I'd love to hear more about that. I would have assumed that because you have different platforms, that the performance that you're going to get is going to be somewhat dictated by that platform.
Yeah, because you see, when it comes to performance, right? Performance comes down to the infrastructure, like how much resources you have, right? CPU, RAM, right? Availability level, things like that, service level. And that's infrastructure, right? And then you have another aspect of performance, which is like how your application design, architecture, right? But it has nothing to do with the choice of your programming languages, right? So if I want to summarize performance, it comes to the resources, infrastructure, and the logic of your smart contract. Because most of the time, the problem that some of these blockchain applications they have is that the logic of their blockchain smart contract is poorly designed. And that's affected performance, not the programming language itself, right?
Yeah, would you say that it's fair to say that they have a greater impact, but there's still an impact depending on the language? I just want to be clear on that one, because I think certainly while the other points that you make are all valid, how you write your application, the architectural decisions, there are lots of factors that come into play when it comes to performance. Still, if you were going to say use the same infrastructure and environment, then perhaps you would see some differences. But
yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. And then one thing is that when it comes to the infrastructure, as Jeff, you mentioned, for example, Kubernetes is very good. Kubernetes is great, I mean? So the thing is that when it comes to your infrastructure, even beside resources like CPU and RAM, even some of the tools that the platform offers play an important role,
Yes, sir. Thank you. There's another question that came in. So is there a way to compare and contrast the computing requirement and costs of a smart contract chain code or hosting Hyperledger Fabric Network app across these cloud offerings? So
that's a tricky question. So the thing is that honestly, I haven't tried to, I'm not sure of such a tools that you can deploy on this. But one thing is that you can see, to put it this way, the first part of the answer is that no, I haven't aware of such tools, and I haven't tried. Now the second thing is that in most of the enterprise large scale companies, the selection of their platform comes down with what they already are using, right? So if a company like like a Bank of America, if they're already using Azure or they're using already IBM, they just use the IBM for their blockchain service, you know. So this, sometimes some of these decisions come from the top, right? They if they already know a member of the Azure or IBM, they are going to use the IBM for blockchain services because it's very easy to integrate with their already existing platform that they have.
I have a question about Kubernetes as a service on other platforms. Is it easy to deploy Fabric on Kubernetes on Azure, for example?
So Azure is not supporting. Azure used to support Kubernetes on their platform, but Azure is not supporting that. I mean, Azure does not support blockchain anymore. Now, what was your question? What was your question? Azure, or what was the second part?
I think the question was, is it simple to deploy Hyperledger Fabric onto a Kubernetes environment?
Yeah, if you know Kubernetes, yes. I mean, look, Kubernetes is amazing because, you know, when you come to the scaling and managing your network, Kubernetes is awesome. It's a great tools to use. But again, if you know Kubernetes, yes, it's easy to do it. But in general, if you are like completely new to Kubernetes, it might be difficult. But the answer is yes, Kubernetes is good.
Fantastic. Yeah, and just to clarify on the Azure piece too, I think what you're saying there is that there isn't a managed service for Hyperledger Fabric that's on Azure. You could still go in today if you wanted to, and you could install, say, a Kubernetes platform, for instance, OpenShift, and then you could go and you could install Hyperledger Fabric into that Kubernetes environment.
Yes, of course. These are open source. You can install them.
Just wanted to make sure that was clear to folks.
Yeah, of course.
And also wanted to bring up a point that Mike Brunt made, which was regarding, you know, there are different language choices, you know, for chain code. And in respect to Java, he was talking about how tuning the JVM, as you would imagine, when it comes to that would potentially have an impact, or in this case, he says a fairly dramatic beneficial impact on the performance. So good point, and certainly want to make sure that we bring that out.
Yes, exactly. So the thing is that, again, one of the job of the system admin is just monitor the performance and to make sure that, you know, how the performance of the system has been monitored, and if there's something that they can improve it, you know, is part related to system admin.
I would say that, you know, there are some, there's certainly been benchmarks and tests and around performance that you can find if you search out on the web, and there's also the Hyperledger Fabric Performance Group, so you can probably find some information there as well. You know, obviously, there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to performance. I mean, it's been that way for years, even going back to the application server wars back in the day. You know, when people were looking at the transactions per second and looking at all of those pieces. So all of that is, you know, certainly food for thought. Performance is an interesting topic, but I highly recommend that you take a look out there, and then again, going back to Matt's point earlier, none of that means a thing if you don't write your application properly, right?
Yes, exactly.
And the database is another piece, right? So, you know, whether you're using CouchDB or using LevelDB, and we talked about CouchDB providing caching, certainly with LevelDB versus CouchDB, there was certainly some performance differences that we saw, especially earlier on working with Fabric. So all of those are considerations and things you should look at.
Exactly. And then coming back to you, Jeff, the thing is that you have to come up with a very good architecture for how you manage off-the-chain data, right? What data need to go on the chain and what data need to go off the chain, right? These decisions has to be carefully, you know, has to be done, because the more you put your data on the chain, the less performance become, because so much heavy chain become, right? The network. And so the things like you have to, the architecture is very important. To know how you're designing your system, you know, how you're putting together logic for your smart contract. You're right, Jeff.
Fantastic. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour now. It's 1 o'clock. I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank especially, first of all, Matt for a wonderful presentation. Check out his book, their shameless plug. And also I'd like to thank the community for providing these tips, providing these links. Folks, take a look at what's in the chat window because there's some good stuff there. And also, please, please, please contact us. Let us know what suggestions you have for upcoming sessions that we can provide you with. Whether we touch everything, whether we're talking about Hyperledger, talking about identity, whether we're talking about non-fungible tokens, there's so many topics of interest. So please let us know what you'd like to hear about, and we'll be sure to make sure we schedule something in the near future. And also, if you're interested in presenting, please let us know that as well. Matt, thanks again for a great session, and look forward to seeing everyone at our next event.
Thanks, Jeff. Have a wonderful afternoon, and take care of everyone. Take care. Bye. Bye.